Okay, so speaker roles. Each speaker has a different kind of role in the debate, something that they're expected to do. I'll highlight for you when there are things that are rules, but for the most part, these are just recommendations. One reason that it's really helpful to have a sense of what your role in the debate is that it means that when you go from one debate to another, it can help you have a bit of structure to the way that you prep your speeches and have a bit of a template for what you're going to say in that speech or how you're going to organize your thoughts from one debate to the next. So this is the order that speeches happen in. So we start with the first affirmative speaker and then the first negative speaker, and we continue along until we get to the replies, and we hear the negative reply and then the affirmative reply. I don't know why we do that, but that's just the way that it happens. The affirmative team get the first word and the last word, and the negative team get the first right of reply. Okay, so first F. The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you explain all the points that your team is going to bring up. Then you want to set up what you stand for. And then you want to start proving your case with normally 2 or 3 substantive points. I recommend that you try for 2 substantive points most of the time. We find that that's the right number to be able to have enough time to talk about each point, while also having a little bit of structure to the speech. I might, if we've got some time at the end, show you some exemplars. If we don't have time at the end, what I'll do is I'll send you a link to our YouTube channel where you can see all of the debates from Nationals last year, because we held Nationals online. We recorded all the debates at that event, so you can watch people doing this and see some examples of some really good speakers and how they do this. Okay, first neg. So the first thing is the same. You want to make sure that you say what your points are going to be. The second thing is also the same. You want to make it really clear what you're going to stand for in the debate. The third thing is different, which is that you want to do some rebuttal, which is explain why you disagree with the things that the other team has said. So what was the faults in the points that they made, which things didn't make sense or weren't true, and why does that matter? And then the last thing you want to do is the same, which is to make your own substantive arguments. So the difference there is that if the affirmative team is saying the sky is blue and you're saying the sky is grey, rebuttal is about saying they said the sky is blue because the sea is blue. Well, actually the sea is green. And that's true because I looked out my window this morning and I saw the sea and it was green. And then your own substantive argument is an argument for why the sky is grey. Like, there are lots of clouds in the sky, that makes it grey. So the rebuttal is about attacking somebody else's point, and substantive is about making your own case for why something different is true. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Okay, second speakers. So second speakers have a similar job to first negative, and they've got 3 roles to fulfill. The first thing is that you want to do rebuttal to the case that you've heard so far from the opposition. The second thing is that you want to defend your own substantive case. So the other team have had a chance to rebut you probably by now, and you want to explain why that rebuttal isn't true, or if your first speaker maybe missed something out or didn't have time, or you've thought of additional examples or additional reasons, you want to be making sure that you're defending your own case from attack. So attacking the other team, defending your own case from attack. And then the last thing that you want to do is to have 1 point of your own, so 1 substantive argument of your own. Normally, I would say that you should spend about a half to 2/3 of your speech doing the first 2 things, and about a third of your speech doing the last thing. Okay, third speakers, this is definitely, I think, the trickiest one to explain because it can be pretty different depending on the debate. But the first thing that you want to do is identify the key issues in the debate. Sometimes we call them clash points, sometimes we call them themes. So you want to, if the debate has been about veganism, maybe there's a point about personal autonomy, and both sides have made arguments about that. Maybe there's a point about the environment that everyone's been talking about. Maybe there's a point about culture and food that everyone's been talking about. And you want to try and break the debate up into those three different themes. And then the second thing you want to do is under each of those themes, defend what your team said about it. So explain, our team told you that culture was really important and that food is an integral part of that culture. So it would be a really huge loss to the world if everyone went vegan. And then the second thing under that clash point that you want to do is rebut the other team's arguments. So you would say, we told you this, it was important for that reason. They told you that it would be really easy to switch out meat for vegan options. That's not true because, and so that means that the culture is lost and that's really important. And then the last thing you want to do is explain why that rebuttal means you won that clash point. So that would look like saying, because I proved to you that it's not easy to swap vegan options in for meat, that means that there will be a harm to culture. And because I explained to you that culture is really important for these reasons, we've won that clash point. So that's our kind of recommended structure for third speeches, is identify the issues. What did you say? What did they say? Why was what you said more important than what they said or better than what they said? That's a really tricky thing to do. And if you find when you start out that it's easiest for you to just go point by point, or you find that you just want to go stream of consciousness and try it out, that's fine. If you think that you want to try and do one clash point and then try point by point, or one clash point and then try the rest of the debate stream of consciousness, that's fine. Just practice, see how you go. But I really encourage you to try it out. So try identifying what the main things that you were debating about, what were the main issues that kept coming up in the debate, and then what did you say, what did they say, why was what you said more true or more important than what they said. And then the one rule about a third speaker, though, is that you're not allowed to make a new substantive argument. So this is a bit of a tricky, I guess, you're allowed, it can be a little bit tricky to say exactly what that means, because you are allowed to add depth to points that you guys have already been making, but you're not allowed to make a totally new point. So in the veganism debate, maybe if the whole debate so far had been about personal choice and culture, you can't at third bring up a whole new area of the debate and be like, and also be really good for the environment. You are allowed to add new examples or add new analysis to points that already exist in the debate, but you're not allowed to bring up a whole new topic and make an argument about it. I mean, the reason for that is that it just means that the other team doesn't have a chance to respond to you when you're on the neg. And it wouldn't be fair if only the third negative speaker wasn't allowed to bring it up. So to make it fair, both third speakers are not allowed to make new arguments in the debate to ensure that teams are making arguments early on and actually debating about them as they go through. Okay, and then the last speaker role in the debate is reply speakers. Your reply speaker has to be your first speaker or your second speaker, because otherwise the third negative speaker would just talk and then immediately have to give another speech. What you're doing in a reply is you're trying to give a biased adjudication. So you're explaining why your team won by explaining what happened in the debate. So what were the main issues in the debate? What did each team say and why did we win on those issues? Similar to a third speaker, but you're not bringing up new reasons or adding new rebuttal or giving new analysis. You're just explaining why things that had already happened mean that you won the debate. Sometimes I like to think about it as if it's the end of the day, you're sitting down to have dinner, you're explaining why, you're explaining to your family, oh, we totally should have won that debate. Here's all the things that everybody said and why we should have won it instead of them. So you're not making new arguments, you're explaining in retrospect why the arguments you already made wins you the debate. That can be a little bit tricky to wrap your mind around at first, but I promise that it's not as hard as it sounds. And if you give it a go and do it a couple of times, get some feedback, you will eventually find a rhythm of how to do replies. So here are some tips. First is to start by identifying the most important issue in the debate. So most debates have one issue that is the most important thing in the debate. Sometimes there are a couple of things that really matter, but most of the time there's one issue that is more important than the others. Start there, start with the thing that matters the most, explain what each team said on the issue. We said this, they said this, here's why what we said is more important or more true. Hopefully both, hopefully more true and more important than what they said. Try to keep it brief because speeches are only half as long. That means just focusing on the most important things each team said, the best reasons that you gave, the best reasons that they gave. And the last thing I would say about replies is often, because you're not making new arguments, a good opportunity to practice rhetoric or delivery or style and use those things to explain why your material really mattered in the debate. Okay, points of information. Points of information are short questions that you can ask the other speaker. In this style, it has to be a question, but if you're not going to lose the debate if it's not a question, but try as much as you can to make it a question. You can't offer a point of information in the first minute of a speaker's speech or in the last minute of a speaker's speech. And the speaker can always refuse a point of information. So if you don't want to take POIs, it's perfectly fine to just wave them down every time. You can verbally say no, you can wave, you can just ignore them, that's fine. I would say that it's best not to continually interrupt yourself. And I would also say that if you're really just starting out and you feel a bit nervous and people are offering you lots of points of information, it's perfectly respectable to just say to the speaker, I'm not going to take a point of information right now, or I'm not going to take a point until the end of my speech, or I'm not going to take a point of information. I really encourage you to try and take a point of information. It's not as scary as it often seems. But if it's really impacting your ability to speak, you are allowed to say that. Okay. When you accept a point of information, when you offer a point of information, you get a maximum of 15 seconds to offer that point of information, just so that you're not eating into the other speaker's speech heaps. And in order to not be rude, make sure that you are just being mindful of the other person, right? So don't offer one every 10 seconds. And if someone seems like they're really ruffled by the point of information, if you keep offering them really loudly and aggressively, interrupting their speech, they're probably not going to take you. So give the speaker a bit of space, but if you can, try and offer a few and try and take 1 or 2 points of information in your speech. So how do you actually ask a good point of information? The first thing is that it should be relevant to the debate, and you should be asking the point of information for a reason. Like you should have a sense of, why am I asking the speaker this question? The second thing is that yes or no questions are normally less impactful than open-ended questions. That's because if you say, don't you think that being vegan is good for the environment? The other speaker will either just say yes or no. And then they'll move on. Whereas if you ask an open-ended question like, what is something that would be more helpful for the environment than being vegan? The other speaker has to spend some of their speech explaining their answer to your question to you. And then the next thing I would say is that don't just ask the speaker if they agree with their case, because they're just going to say yes. A lot of points of information really are just veiled questions, which are, don't you agree with your case, or don't you agree with our case in general? So for example, don't you think it's unfair to ban people from eating meat? The other speaker is just going to say no because that's the position that they have to take in the debate. So asking something a bit more specific that gets a little bit more at the heart of the actual reasons they're giving as to why it's unfair, rather than just whether it is unfair, will be a more impactful point of information. Some tips for making them better is to make sure you write them down. I would recommend that your team just has a piece of paper that has POIs written at the top. And anytime one of you thinks of a point of information, you can write it down. And that way, if you have between the three of you 3 or 4 points of information, most likely the other speakers are not going to accept many more than that. And you can spend the whole debate standing up and trying to offer those 3 or 4 points of information. Um, and the last thing is that you are allowed to ask points of information that are not on the topic that the speaker is currently talking about. As long as they're still relevant to the debate, that can still make a good point of information. So if they're talking about the environment and your question is about individual choice, that's perfectly fine. But it's probably a waste of a point of information to ask a question about something completely unrelated to the debate that you're having.